Ethan was caught in the rain, proposing to me on the very day his beloved sweetheart, Evelyn, got engaged. His face was a mask of despair then, and I, without a moment's hesitation, reached out and pulled him back from the edge. But Ethan regretted it. After the wedding, he confessed that he didn't love me but wouldn't abandon me either. He even said I was a stain on his life that he could never wash away. Finally, I decided to give up on this hopeless marriage. Yet, Ethan's eyes reddened, and he held me, weeping bitterly. "Lily, I won't let you go. Even if it means death, you'll die by my side." 1. I walked into Ethan's company, carrying a thermos, only to be stopped by the new security guard. He didn't recognize me, and he certainly didn't believe my claims. Forced into a corner, I reluctantly called Ethan. It rang only twice before being cut off. Under the guard's suspicious gaze, my face flushed, and I sent a text message. Predictably, Ethan didn't reply. It wasn't until half an hour later that the guard received instructions to let her through. "Ms. Lily, you can go up now." His official tone couldn't hide the juicy gossip simmering beneath. I mumbled a thank you and scurried into the elevator. Behind me, the guard muttered under his breath. "Is she really the CEO's wife? Ethan's taste is terrible. There's just no comparison." Inside Ethan's office, I understood what the guard meant when I saw the stunning woman before me. Compared to the old photos in Ethan's wallet, she had shed her youthful innocence and become even more mature and captivating. But her exquisite face was now etched with frost. Standing beside Ethan, she asked without reservation. "Ethan, I didn't realize you were so petty? Are you going to help me or not? Evelyn, is that how you ask for favors?" Ethan raised his eyes, his tone nonchalant. Yet, there was a hint of indulgence hidden within. My heart clenched, and the thermos in my hand almost slipped. The next second, Ethan's gaze fell on me. "Pigeon soup again today?" I nodded weakly, offering him the thermos. "Hurry and drink it while it's hot." A slender, delicate hand beat Ethan to it, snatching the thermos away. I watched as Evelyn tilted her head back and drained the soup. "Ethan, the soup was delicious, thanks for the treat." Evelyn gracefully pulled a tissue from the desk. Her rose-red nails lightly traced Ethan's white shirt. "And Evelyn, never beg." With that, she raised an eyebrow, turned haughtily, and left. From beginning to end, Evelyn didn't give me a single glance. I stood there, stunned, not missing the tenderness that flooded Ethan's eyes as he watched Evelyn's retreating figure. "Ethan, who is that lady?" I bit my lip, asking as casually as I could manage. "An old acquaintance." Ethan's tone was indifferent as he returned to his work. "But, she drank the soup I made for you." "Yeah, I'm not hungry." "If she drank it, she drank it." Ethan didn't even look up. As if remembering something, the corners of his lips curled slightly. My curled fingers dug deeply into my palm, the red marks from the scorching pot throbbing again. I swallowed the lump in my throat, wisely shutting my mouth, not daring to ask another question. Actually, I knew Evelyn. These past few days, news about her had been everywhere. The sudden death of her wealthy husband, the schemes of her stepsons to seize power. Now, her situation could be described as being in deep water. But while the world knew that Evelyn was a Cinderella who married into wealth, few people knew that Evelyn was also Ethan's deeply loved first love before he became successful. And I first heard the name Evelyn on our wedding night. Ethan, drunk and red-eyed, brutally took me. Suppressed sobs echoed in my ear, again and again. "Evelyn, I hate you." 2. Ethan was busy. So busy that he didn't even notice when I left. My chest felt tight and heavy. I wanted to get a glass of water from the break room, but I heard whispers coming from inside. "Cindy, was that woman carrying the thermos really CEO Ethan's wife? She's so plain. How could Ethan, who's so handsome and rich, fall for her? You don't understand. This company used to belong to Lily's dad." The familiar voice belonged to Ethan's secretary, Cindy. A few days ago, after I had called Ethan several times and been hung up on, Cindy had called me back. She had asked if I needed to reach Ethan urgently. But when she heard me stammer that I just wanted to ask if he would be home for dinner, she had given a slightly mocking laugh. "Ms. Lily, as the CEO's wife, I suggest you focus more on your own life. Don't keep calling and harassing Ethan when he's discussing important business." Her cutting words still echoed in my ears. Now, she was gossiping about me and Ethan again. "Rosie, I'll tell you another secret." Her voice lowered, filled with the excitement of watching a drama unfold. "The Evelyn who came looking for him today is CEO Ethan's ex-girlfriend. I heard that back then, Lily took advantage of her father's favor towards Ethan, forcefully broke them up, and forced Ethan to marry her. These past few years, the way Ethan treats Lily is worse than the way I treat my dog. The CEO's wife might be changing." "No, that's not how it is." The grating giggles rang out. I wanted to rush in and retort, but my feet were rooted to the spot, unable to move an inch. 3. When I left Ethan's company, the once clear sky had turned into a downpour. The security guard who had stopped me earlier eagerly offered me an umbrella. I shook my head, clutching the thermos tightly, and walked straight into the rain. The day Ethan and I registered our marriage, it was raining just as heavily. At that time, as if arranged by fate, a gust of wind blew away the umbrella in my hand. At that moment, I saw Ethan standing blankly in the rain. His head was lowered, and he looked so sad. It wasn't until I held the umbrella high above his head that he came back to his senses. "Lily?" Ethan turned his head in confusion, his face filled with desolation. "Ethan, are you crying?" Looking at his red eyes, I blurted out the question. But Ethan didn't answer. He stared straight at me, giving a smile that was more painful than crying. Then, he suddenly asked me, "Lily, you like me, don't you?" Before I could react, he dropped another bombshell. "Let's get married." Despair overflowed in Ethan's eyes. Like a drowning man, it seemed that at that moment, only I could save him. So that day, filled with immense joy and trepidation, I ended my long unrequited love and became Ethan's legal wife. But later, I found out. That day was also the day Evelyn and her husband got engaged. And Ethan was stopped by security outside, waiting foolishly in the rain for his sweetheart to turn back. Until, the engagement ceremony was successfully concluded. Until, he met me. Unfortunately, I wasn't Ethan's salvation. I was just a stain on his life that he couldn't erase. 4. Why aren't the lights on? It was the early hours of the morning when Ethan came home, and I was sitting on the sofa in a daze. Perhaps he had drunk too much at the social event, as a flush colored Ethan's handsome face. His slender fingers carelessly loosened his tie. Lazy and sensual. It was the kind that would make me fall in love at first sight, no matter how many years I looked at him. Seeing my infatuated gaze, a hint of contempt flashed in Ethan's eyes. But then, it was replaced by lust. "Did you shower?" He extended an invitation to me. I suddenly snapped back to reality and pushed away his hand that was reaching for me. Ouch. The sharp pain in my palm made me cry out involuntarily. Looking at Ethan's darkening expression, I said awkwardly, "Sorry. I'm on my period today." I lied to Ethan. My period had ended a week ago. I just didn't want him to see my bruised arm from the blood draw. With his desire extinguished, Ethan straightened up in disappointment. He never cared about my affairs, so he wouldn't notice that I was lying to him. I thought there wouldn't be any more communication between Ethan and me tonight. But Ethan suddenly grabbed my wrist. The hideous wound on my palm was exposed before his eyes. After just one glance, Ethan frowned deeply. "What happened?" "It's nothing, I just accidentally burned myself while making soup this afternoon." "Lily, can being stupid be contagious to your hands too?" Ethan was speechless, letting out a tired sigh. "I really don't know what you're good at." His light-hearted comment pierced my heart. Before I could react, Ethan turned and strode away, no longer giving me a glance. 5. Give me your hand. When Ethan returned with iodine and cotton swabs, standing in front of me, my eyes reddened, and the tears I had been holding back finally burst. The sudden outburst of emotion stunned Ethan for a moment. Except for the day of my dad's funeral, he had never seen me cry so sadly. A hint of panic flashed in his surprised eyes. "Okay, stop crying." With a sigh, I was pulled into a warm embrace. Ethan raised his hand and patted my back stiffly. And my heart calmed down instantly. "Does the wound hurt a lot?" Seeing me shake my head, Ethan frowned even more, his confusion deepening. "Then why are you crying, Lily?" Ethan patiently waited for my response for once. I wanted to tell him that it was his sudden tenderness that had torn open my suppressed grievances. I wanted to tell him even more that on the nightstand was a diagnosis I didn't dare face. But I was crying too hard. I could only keep shaking my head, sobbing, unable to say a word. 6. Seeing me silent like a punching bag, Ethan sighed, and after a long moment, reluctantly grabbed my wrist. "All right, Lily, I was a bit upset earlier, and my words were a bit harsh. Don't cry." With that, he picked up a cotton swab and gently dabbed it on my palm. The stinging coolness made my body tremble unconsciously. "Does it hurt?" Ethan paused his movements, and the next moment, his touch became even gentler. "No, it doesn't hurt." I finally stopped sobbing. After a moment of hesitation, I couldn't help but ask with concern. "Why, are you in a bad mood?" "It's work stuff, you wouldn't understand even if I told you." Ethan seemed to remember his worries, and his tone became a little impatient. I quickly shut my mouth, not daring to ask another question. After all, it was rare for Ethan to be so considerate and gentle with me. Even if I was stupid, I wouldn't be foolish enough to break this happiness right now. But the medicine on the wound always runs out eventually. "Okay." At the same time as Ethan's voice sounded, I dejectedly pulled my hand back. But the next moment, I was pulled into the sofa by him. I'm on my pee. I know. He interrupted me, amused. I just want to hold you. Lily, I'm not that much of a beast. The sofa wasn't big, and Ethan tightened his arms around me. My back was pressed against a hot chest. I could clearly feel the strong heartbeats, one after another. In the 3rd year of our marriage, my love was still full of energy. But I was forced to enter the countdown of my life. I blinked, unable to resist snuggling into Ethan's arms. The sound of breathing beside my ear suddenly became heavier. Don't move. His deep voice was full of desire. Are you doing this on purpose, Lily? As if as punishment, a light slap landed on my butt. But not only did I not respond, I also asked at the wrong moment. Ethan, will you get back together with Ms. Evelyn? 7. The atmosphere of ambiguity vanished in an instant. After a long silence, a detached voice came. Lily, I promised your dad that I would never take the initiative to divorce you. Ethan didn't ask me how I knew about him and Evelyn. Nor did he expose my deliberate ignorance in his office that afternoon. Then do you love me, Ethan? I asked impulsively again, stubbornly wanting an answer. And this time, I waited a long time, but still didn't get Ethan's answer. Silence was the last bit of decency he left me. Once, I naively thought that one day I could move Ethan and make him fall in love with me. But now, even heaven can't bear to watch me be so infatuated with him. Ethan, if one day I leave you, would you be sad? After a long silence, I broke the silence, asking as casually as possible. But my heart was clenched into a ball, and even breathing hurt faintly. I thought that even if it was just raising a dog, after a few years, Ethan would have some feelings, right? You leave me? This time Ethan didn't stay silent. As if he had heard a joke, he chuckled and asked. Where would you go if you left me? Can you earn money to support yourself? Lily, I don't even want to think about your question. The words of rebuttal escaped my mouth. I still have the money my dad left me, I can spend it for the rest of my life. Besides, I don't need money anymore. Perhaps because he was drunk, Ethan ignored my murmur. And he always looked down on my stupid and unenterprising appearance. So, he sarcastically mocked me. You really are a delicate young lady, that's all you amount to. Well, don't forget to tell me when you leave. The warm embrace was withdrawn. Ethan coldly got up, unwilling to pay me any more attention. 8. Ethan suddenly became unusually busy. Occasionally, when I woke up in the middle of the night, I could hear his suppressed voice in the study. The Yuan family, Evelyn, whenever those words vaguely reached my ears. I would open my eyes and stare at the ceiling, starting another sleepless night. One day, Ethan and I were rare enough to sit at the same table for breakfast. As I helped him to a second bowl of congee, I finally couldn't help but ask in a timid voice. Ethan, are you going to help Ms. Evelyn? Ethan paused his toast-cutting action, then looked up and faced me frankly. Lily, I am a businessman. Of course I want to get a slice of anything profitable. Ethan made no secret of his ambition to expand his business empire. But I knew he was lying. These past few days, I had received several calls from senior company members. They complained incessantly, hoping I could persuade Ethan not to act rashly. That's when I understood how murky and deep the Yuan family's waters were. And Ethan, who never made a losing deal, was now willing to gamble everything he had for Evelyn. My heart felt as if it was being gnawed by thousands of ants. I lowered my head and gave a soft sound. A tear suddenly fell into the dinner plate. But Ethan didn't notice my abnormality. He hurriedly finished his breakfast, got up and prepared to leave. But before leaving, he glanced at me up and down, frowning unhappily. Lily, why have you been so lifeless lately? Remember to dress yourself up nicely for Grandpa Goo's birthday banquet tonight. Don't embarrass me again. 9. Grandpa Goo was at the top of the pyramid in the Kuan City business circle. Although this birthday banquet was held in a low-key manner, there were still many people who attended. And I was most afraid of interacting with people. At the banquet, I nervously clung to Ethan, barely keeping up with his pace. But suddenly, I heard a soft and charming cry. CEO Ethan. Evelyn appeared in a deep V-neck red dress, attracting all the attention around her. But she completely ignored them, and went straight to Ethan. Smiling charmingly and movingly. Can I have this dance? Reason? Ethan raised an eyebrow, asking back playfully. My body stiffened instantly. CEO Ethan, why bother asking when you already know the answer? Evelyn curved her lips and flirtatiously tugged at Ethan's tie. After all, once you stand here, my eyes can't see anyone else. At that moment, I clearly saw the desire burning in Ethan's eyes. My heart was in a mess, and I nervously tightened my grip on Ethan's arm. But the next second, I was lightly pushed away by him. Ms. Evelyn, that is truly an extreme honor. Ethan stepped forward, took Evelyn's hand, and kissed it gentlemanly. From beginning to end, he didn't give me a single glance. Low whispers came from all directions. The gazes of scrutiny were more like slaps constantly hitting my face. I stood frozen in place, staring blankly at the two people in the center of the dance floor. So tacit, so lingering. Until, a cry of surprise rang out in my ear. "Miss, you're bleeding." 10. I frantically covered my nose. But the blood was still dripping incessantly onto my white dress. Bright and gorgeous, like a flower blooming with life. The surrounding discussions drowned out the soft dance music. But Ethan in the center of the dance floor never turned his head to look at me. Nasal blood mixed with tears, sticking to my face. I lowered my head in embarrassment, rummaging through my bag for a tissue. Suddenly, everything went dark. A suit jacket was placed over my head. "Follow me." My hand was wrapped in an unfamiliar palm, and I couldn't help but shrink back, only to be held even tighter by that person. I couldn't see the road ahead, so I could only let him lead me, gradually moving away from the crowd. The moment I saw the light again, I also saw his face clearly. "Dr. Gu?" I was shocked. The person in front of me was actually the doctor who gave me the diagnosis a while ago. "Miss Lily, didn't you say you didn't have any relatives?" Guyan raised an eyebrow slightly, and exposed the lie I told that day as soon as he opened his mouth. My parents have passed away." As for Ethan, I awkwardly wrung my fingers, unable to bring myself to say my marriage in name only with Ethan. But Guyan seemed to guess what I was thinking. He smiled reassuringly at me, but the words he spoke were blunt and sarcastic. "But from my point of view, it doesn't make much difference whether you have this husband or not. Have you told Ethan about your illness?" I shook my head, then looked up and pleaded. "Dr. Gu, please, don't tell Ethan yet." "Then when are you going to tell him?" "When you're in a box." Guyan asked back with a blank expression. I didn't expect that under his gentle face, there was actually a sharp tongue. I couldn't help but widen my eyes, stammering for a long time, unable to squeeze out a word. At that time, I didn't realize that my appearance, in Guyan's eyes, was like a frightened little white rabbit with red eyes. So, I didn't notice that when I bit my lip in embarrassment. Guyan's obscure eyes, and the way his Adam's apple rolled. 11. "Do you want some candy?" Guyan suddenly changed the subject, taking out a candy from who knows where. My dull brain obviously couldn't keep up with his jumping train of thought. Seeing me standing there with my mouth open, Guyan curved his lips, raised his hand and stuffed the candy into my mouth. The rich milky aroma filled my entire mouth. It was obviously very sweet, but I felt so bitter that I shed tears. And Guyan didn't make fun of me this time. He just stood quietly beside me, and after I calmed down, he said unhurriedly, "Lily, you didn't come for the follow-up examination a few days ago. A disobedient patient like you still needs someone to supervise you. So, let's add each other as friends." Guyan's matter-of-course attitude made it difficult for me to say the words I wanted to refuse. After adding him as a friend, I was shocked to realize that I had been outside for nearly 20 minutes. Ethan and Evelyn's duet dance should have been over long ago. But my phone hadn't received any messages from Ethan. Seeing me become depressed again, Guyan's eyebrows quickly furrowed for a moment. Then, his eyes lit up. "Lily, follow me." He took my hand very naturally, but I suddenly felt a little embarrassed. This was the second time. Apart from my dad and Ethan, I had never been so close to any other man. Lost in thought, Guyan made a few turns and brought me to a corner of the garden. A wooden swing stood there quietly. "Come on." Guyan patted the swing with a smile. "When I was a child, whenever I was unhappy, I would come here." Swinging on the swing, I felt like all my troubles were gone. I looked at Guyan in a daze, and realized that he had two shallow dimples when he smiled. Unlike Ethan's sharp features, Guyan's handsomeness added a bit of gentleness. He seemed like a naturally magical young master, always able to make people unable to refuse. "So Lily, are you still feeling sad now?" The swing swayed slowly, and I pursed my lips, gently nodding. "What about now?" Before Guyan finished speaking, he pushed me hard again. The gentle evening breeze brushed past the broken hair on my forehead. When the swing finally swung to its highest point, I couldn't help but curl the corners of my mouth at Guyan. 12. After the swing came to a stop, I was about to get off, but Guyan held my shoulders down. I watched as he knelt on one knee in front of me. After taking off my shoes, he placed my feet on his bent knees. The back of my heel was red and swollen, and the blisters had already oozed blood. Whether it was my imagination or not, I seemed to see a flash of heartache in Guyan's eyes. "I saw you limping when you walked at the banquet just now. Ill-fitting crystal shoes, no matter how beautiful they are, don't force yourself to wear them. Otherwise, you'll only hurt yourself." As he spoke, Guyan took out 2 bandages and carefully applied them to my wounds. My heart felt like it had been severely pinched, and my nose became sore again. Everything I was wearing today was prepared for me by Ethan. When I first put on the shoes, I felt that they were half a size too small. But I didn't dare to tell Ethan, so I could only endure the pain and keep up with his pace. And Ethan not only didn't notice my discomfort, but also impatiently urged me several times. I thought I didn't understand Guyon's implication. But I was like Cinderella's stepsister, who didn't hesitate to cut flesh and fingers in order to wear the crystal shoes. Even if Ethan brought me more neglect and harm, as long as I could stay by his side, I would be willing. Seeing me lower my head with red eyes again, Guyon sighed helplessly. He opened his mouth, just about to say something, but was interrupted by a cold voice. Lily, what are you doing? 13. I looked in the direction of the voice, and saw Ethan and Evelyn standing not far away. The evening breeze swept in with a chill, and Evelyn wrapped Ethan's coat around her shoulders, then leaned in and stuck even closer to him. The intimate posture was as if the two of them had never been separated in these 3 years. Lily, aren't you coming over? Ethan stared straight at me, and his brows furrowed for a moment when he glanced at Guyon beside me. I was so frightened that I hurriedly got up from the swing, but forgot that my feet were still resting on Guyon's knees. Be careful. Guyon raised his hand and wrapped it around my staggering body. My nose brushed against his neck, and I even felt the thump-thump, pulsating pulse. I was both anxious and ashamed, and pushed Guyon away, completely unaware that the body under my hand stiffened. Not caring to put on my shoes, I trotted to Ethan's side. Lily, why did you make yourself so dirty? Ethan frowned and looked me up and down, his tone full of disgust. Through Ethan's eyes, I saw my current appearance clearly. Messy hair, red and swollen eyes, and dried bloodstains on my chest. I turned my head away in embarrassment, but met Evelyn's teasing gaze. Miss Lily, nice to see you again. Whose gentleman's suit are you wearing? Evelyn asked as if inadvertently, but I saw Ethan's face turn even darker. I anxiously opened my mouth, wanting to explain the whole story to Ethan, but suddenly heard Guyon's voice coming from behind. Ms. Evelyn, why don't you talk about which gentleman's coat you're wearing first? Guyon carried my shoes and walked slowly to my side, just blocking the line of sight between me and Evelyn. Then, he raised an eyebrow in the direction of Ethan, and said meaningfully, CEO Ethan, even if the business is getting bigger and bigger, don't forget the basics. Ethan's face instantly became gloomy. It had been a long time since anyone dared to point out his past so blatantly. Standing at a high place for too long, even Ethan himself had almost forgotten. In the past, he was just an orphan whose parents died unexpectedly and could barely afford to study. And the current Way Corporation, 3 years ago, of course, did not belong to him either. 14. Young Master Gu has the leisure to remind me, it's better to care more about your own backyard that's on fire. Ethan was provoked, and his words became impolite. A while ago, Grandpa Gu recognized 2 illegitimate children, and the whole circle was discussing it. But Guyon didn't care about Ethan's targeting at all. He just turned his head to look at me, and said gently, Lily, don't forget, see you next time. Under Ethan's murderous gaze, I lowered my head awkwardly, not daring to respond to him again. And Evelyn's face began to look ugly after Guyon appeared. She smoothed the broken hair by her ears, and forced a smile. Young Master Gu, you. Ms. Evelyn, didn't your husband just die? Guyon interrupted her, and asked back with a smile that was not a smile. How are you in the mood to come out and congratulate my dad on his birthday? After saying that, he ignored Evelyn's pale face, turned around and left. On the way back, I explained to Ethan in a low voice. When I emphasized again that Guyon had only helped me occasionally, and that I didn't know he was the second young master of the Gu family, Ethan finally stopped his silence and laughed angrily. Lily, are you afraid that I'll misunderstand your relationship with Guyon? I'm not stupid, and Guyon isn't blind either. I've been competing with the Gu family for a piece of land recently. You tell me, how can it be such a coincidence that Guyon helped you out? Ethan warned me with a serious face, forbidding me to have any more contact with Guyon. Listening to Ethan's conspiracy theories, one by one, I was physically and mentally exhausted, and for the first time I had the idea of refuting him. But the words came to my lips, and in the end, I swallowed them back. Seeing me nod obediently, Ethan's furrowed brows finally relaxed. 15. Back at home, I consciously walked into the shower and washed myself clean. After coming out, Ethan pressed me on the bed, and his wandering hands lit a fire on my body. Why have you lost weight? He chuckled and teased me in my ear. Looks like I haven't fed you enough? Since being diagnosed with leukemia, I often felt dizzy, had nosebleeds, and had lost a lot of weight. I forced a smile and silently reached for the nightstand. But Ethan grabbed my hand halfway, holding it in his palm. Lily, how about, we have a baby? My heart sank, and my vision blurred instantly. Actually, Ethan and I had a child once. Not long after we got married, I became pregnant unexpectedly. But before I could be happy, I received the devastating news of my dad's car accident death. At that moment, my world collapsed. I cried every day, until I fainted one day from sadness. When I woke up again, I found myself lying in a hospital bed. Ethan, don't be too sad, you can have more children. Ethan's friend was comforting him. They had their backs to me, and didn't notice that I had opened my eyes. I didn't plan on having this child anyway. Ethan's tone was a little tired, but when he mentioned the child, it was as if he was relieved. I can't imagine what kind of child someone with Lily's stupid genes could give birth to. Now that the child is gone, I feel a lot more relaxed. Everyone seemed to not expect Ethan to say such a thing, and had to awkwardly change the subject. And I lay in the hospital bed, my whole body as if falling into an ice cave. The cold, piercing pain drilled into every corner of my body. I bit my lip tightly, closed my eyes, and silently shed tears. 16. In these 3 years, every time I was intimate with Ethan, I made sure to take safety precautions. I never dared to hope that I could have another child with Ethan. But now, he was actively telling me that he wanted to have a baby with me. If I had heard these words a month ago, I would have been overjoyed. But now, I was sick. My body couldn't conceive a new life. Seeing the tears in my eyes, Ethan paused his movements. Does it hurt a lot? I shook my head and reached out to hug Ethan's neck. Ethan, I want to have a daughter with you. Why? Ethan's voice was a little breathless, and his strength gradually increased. Because, girls look more like their dads. Lily, you do have self-awareness. A chuckle came from my ear, and I stopped talking, just hugging Ethan tighter. After it was over, Ethan rarely held me tenderly in his arms. At that moment, I suddenly had the urge to confess everything to him. If Ethan knew I was dying, would he be sad, or would he finally feel relieved? What's wrong? Ethan saw me about to say something but stopping, and stared at me suspiciously. I bit my lip, just about to speak, but was interrupted by a sudden ringtone. Ethan impatiently glanced at his phone. When he saw that it was Evelyn calling, a hint of hesitation flashed in his eyes. I lowered my head and silently moved back a little. Feeling the emptiness in his arms, Ethan seemed a little dazed. But then he was urged by the ringtone and stood up. You rest first. A faint voice came. Ethan answered the phone and left the room without looking back. 17. I got out of bed and took a pill. After all, my body was not suitable for having children right now. After thinking about it, I opened my phone again and sent a message to Guyun. Dr. Gu, can I come for a checkup next Friday? Yo, it seems like you listened to what I said, knowing you need to treat your illness properly. Guyun replied quickly, as if he had been waiting for my message. I replied a little embarrassed. I want to have a child with Ethan, so I have to work hard to treat my illness. Guyun was probably busy, and didn't reply again. I lay in bed, deliberately not thinking about the relationship between Ethan and Evelyn. I only knew that Ethan had said that he would never abandon me in this life. Now, he was even willing to have a baby with me. That was enough, I thought. I couldn't be too greedy. But why did my heart ache uncontrollably again? 18. These past few days, Ethan seemed to have encountered a difficult matter, putting the baby-making plan aside. I was relieved. After all, always taking medicine afterwards was also exhausting for my body. But just as I was preparing for a tough battle with leukemia, the arrival of an uninvited guest broke the self-deceiving calm and harmony between Ethan and me. On Tuesday night, a heavy rain suddenly started to fall in the gray sky. Ethan rarely had dinner with me at home. The soup is good, Lily. Hearing Ethan praise me, I couldn't help but raise the corners of my mouth, giggling stupidly. A rapid knock on the door rang out at this time. Who is it? I opened the door in confusion, and the smile on my face froze instantly. I saw Evelyn standing at the door, soaked to the bone. Her cheeks were flushed, and the smell of alcohol on her was overwhelming. Move aside, where's Ethan? She pushed me unceremoniously, and when her eyes saw Ethan, she took a deep breath and walked straight forward. Ethan, why did you suddenly withdraw your investment? Ethan stood up and reached out to support Evelyn, who was swaying a little from being drunk. He pursed his lips, and twisted his eyebrows tightly in tangled expression. Evelyn, you're drunk, I'll explain to you tomorrow. I thought I roughly knew what Evelyn was questioning. I didn't have the ability to persuade Ethan, but the elders of the company's board of directors wouldn't sit idly by. But Evelyn was obviously very drunk. She stared straight at Ethan, and after a long time, snorted coldly. Then, I watched as she took off the dress that was clinging to her body. The perfect curves of her body were exposed to the air. Evelyn charmingly wrapped her arms around Ethan's neck and blew gently in his ear. Ethan, I admit, it's been 3 years, you won. And now, I am your trophy. Ethan's eyes deepened, and the hand holding Evelyn's shoulder was faintly exerting force. He didn't hug Evelyn back, but he didn't push her away either. Until, Evelyn's bright red lips touched his. What are you trying to do? I shouted out loud, unable to hold back the anger in my heart, and rushed forward to pull Evelyn away. Evelyn staggered a few steps, but turned a blind eye to me, and wanted to hug Ethan again. Get out. Get out. I was so angry that my eyes turned red, and I kept pushing Evelyn. The scene became chaotic, until Ethan's impatient voice came. "Stop it." Evelyn stopped instantly, but I, due to inertia, slapped her face. Slap. My fingernails scratched Evelyn's fair face. She turned her head, and suppressed tears were swirling in her eyes. "Lily, can't you understand when I tell you to stop?" Ethan's voice was full of anger. I looked up blankly, just about to explain, but was pushed to the ground by a strong force. My knees heavily hit the floor tiles, and the intense pain made me kneel on the ground, unable to stand up for a long time. 19. Ethan picked up the coat from the back of the chair and put it on Evelyn. "Let's go upstairs and talk." His deep voice was full of heartache, and the next second, Evelyn was in his arms. Evelyn's head was buried in Ethan's chest, and I clearly saw the triumphant smile on the corner of her mouth. Anger rushed to my head again, and I stood up, limping and blocking Ethan. "Ethan, you can't take her upstairs." I bit my lip, and for the first time said no to Ethan. "Lily, I'm just taking Evelyn upstairs to rest." Ethan looked down at me, and explained coldly. He strode away, but I opened my arms and shook my head firmly. "Ethan, this is my home, you can't." I wanted to remind Ethan that he had promised me, seeing how afraid I was to interact with people, that he would not bring outsiders to my home. But Ethan's face suddenly darkened when he heard my home. "Your home? Lily, if it weren't for me, with your stupid head, the day your dad died, this house would have been divided up by your relatives who eat people without spitting out bones." Seeing me open my mouth in shock, Ethan chuckled and asked back. "So you think you can still live in a greenhouse, being your Mrs. Gu, is all, thanks to who?" My brain was blank, and I raised my arms in a daze, my fingertips lightly brushing against Ethan's sleeves. "Ethan." As soon as I opened my mouth, tears welled up uncontrollably. Ethan paused his steps, but when Evelyn xiaoruo de hanja, uncomfortable, he tightened his arms around her, and walked up the stairs without hesitation. Lightning tore through the silent night, and the roar in my ears hummed. I looked around blankly, everything in the house became distorted and unfamiliar. Overwhelming panic surged from the bottom of my heart. If this is no longer my home, then, where can I go? 20. It was raining heavily, so heavily that I could no longer see the road ahead. I didn't know where I was, and I didn't know where I should go. I was wandering in the rain like a walking corpse. Until, a pair of familiar and warm hands tightly circled me into his arms. "Lily, what are you doing? Are you trying to die?" In the suppressed anger, there was a strong sense of pity. Guyun? I looked at the person in front of me in a trance, then my eyes went dark and I fainted. When I woke up again, I felt the dry pajamas on my body, and was in a trance for a while. "The clothes were changed for you by the housekeeper." Guyun spoke faintly, sitting by the bed. "Lily, tomorrow is the day for the checkup, what are you doing again?" Looking at Guyun's expressionless face, I lowered my head in embarrassment. Those unbearable scenes were replayed in my mind one by one. Seeing me stammer, Guyun asked a few questions, and pieced together a rough picture of what happened tonight. "So, you were kicked out of your own house?" In the deep voice, the anger seemed to be about to erupt. I shuddered, and quickly shook my head. I came out on my own. "Lily." Guyun sighed, and looked at me with a complex expression. "Did Ethan put a spell on you? How can you be so devoted to him?" Maybe tonight's events gave me too much of a blow. Under Guyun's straight gaze, I suddenly felt a strong desire to confide. The corner of the quilt was repeatedly wrinkled and smoothed in my hand. After a moment of silence, I shook my head and slowly opened my mouth. "Ethan didn't put a spell on me. He saved my life." 21. When I was born, my mom died due to dystocia. When I was a child, my dad was always busy with business, and didn't know that the nanny often bullied and abused me. When he found out, I had become extremely resistant to contact with people due to being too frightened. After entering high school, the stupid and withdrawn me naturally became the target of those bullies. So, I suffered from severe depression and anxiety. One day, I cut my wrists at home, but Ethan, who had returned, caught me. At that time, after being sponsored by my dad for 10 years, Ethan was admitted to the best university in the country. My dad asked him to be my tutor, but he always had a cold face, and I didn't dare to communicate with him too much. But that day, when he held me tightly and desperately ran to the hospital, I realized for the first time that a person's embrace could be so warm. Later, Ethan came forward to solve my troubles at school. "Lily, you really are the most useless rich lady I've ever seen." A warm big hand rubbed the top of my head. "If anyone bullies you again, remember to tell me." The sunlight flowed on Ethan's knife-carved face. At that moment, I completely fell. I hid this love deeply in my heart. Until one day, when Ethan squinted and took a nap, I kissed his lips on a whim. And that day, after Ethan woke up, he stared at me for a long time. When he left, he suddenly turned around and asked me, "Lily, what do you girls like?" It's my girlfriend's birthday soon, can you help me advise me? Ethan discovered the kiss, and indirectly rejected my love. I can't remember how I said goodbye to Ethan that day. I only remember that night, I buried my face in the pillow and cried all night. 22. So, it was really you who broke up Ethan and Evelyn, forcing him to marry you? Guyon frowned and looked at me, after hearing me mention the past. No. I shook my head, thinking of that day, my heart ached again. Evelyn dumped Ethan, so, on the day of her engagement, Ethan wanted me to register our marriage with him. Guyon widened his eyes in surprise, then said with a disappointed expression. Lily, Ethan doesn't love you, why do you have to bet your entire life on it? You really are the stupidest woman I've ever met. I said all this just to let Guyon scold me awake. But when he ruthlessly pointed out the facts, I couldn't help but shed tears again. Okay, stop crying. Guyon lowered his voice, hesitated for a moment, then lifted my chin with one hand. My eyes suddenly met his watery gaze. Lily, the people who care about you won't make you cry, and those who don't care about you, it's useless even if you cry your eyes out. His gentle fingertips lightly wiped my cheeks. So, don't cry in front of Ethan, and don't cry in front of me either. It will hurt my heart. 23. My phone didn't ring all night. The next day, Guyon drove me back home. Guyon, thank you. And, please take care of the lawyer's matter. I avoided Guyon's gaze and thanked him sincerely. Last night, after Guyon said it would hurt his heart. Even if my mind wasn't bright, I could feel the ambiguity in the atmosphere. At that time, I pretended to have a headache and lay down, but my heart was pounding all night. I had no relatives, no friends, only Guyon could help me. So, I could only pretend to be stupid to deal with this sudden feeling. Lily, call me after you pack your things. Guyon originally wanted to wait for me outside, but was temporarily called away by the hospital. I was relieved. After not coming back for a night, the house seemed even more unfamiliar. Ethan and Evelyn were not at home. The bed had also been tidied up neatly. I took a deep breath and started packing. This house was a wedding gift my dad gave us when Ethan and I got married. After living here for 3 years, I didn't expect that the things I really wanted to take away could be packed into just one suitcase. The sound of the door opening made the movement in my hands pause. The sound of footsteps approached little by little. Lily, what are you doing? Ethan stood at the door, his voice containing a hint of annoyance in addition to confusion. I didn't raise my head, and the movement in my hands didn't stop. Ethan, I think, I'll move out. Where to? Ethan asked me, but I didn't know where I could go, so I simply closed my mouth and didn't answer. After a long silence, a sigh broke the silence. Lily. Ethan bent down and held my shoulder, his tone softening unconsciously. Last night, A crisp slap interrupted Ethan's words. The back of his hand turned red, and Ethan stared at me in shock, not believing that I had actually hit him. Ethan, I don't want to mention what happened last night. Taking 2 steps back, I held my hands in front of my chest, mustered up the courage to look Ethan in the eye. In my eyes, there was a calmness I had never had before. Also, please don't touch me. I feel dirty. 24. Lily, are you sick? Ethan's face instantly darkened. Nothing happened between me and Evelyn last night, what kind of emotions are you making here? I am sick. I murmured, and didn't pay attention to his subsequent questioning. Silence spread in the air again. I could even hear Ethan's suppressed breathing. After an unknown amount of time, a cold snort reached my ears. Ethan turned and went to the study, slamming the door heavily. I rubbed my red eyes, and buried my head in packing the last few things. 20 minutes later, I stood at the door of the study, and after hesitating again and again, still knocked on the door. 5 years of unrequited love, 3 years of marriage. I thought, it was time to say goodbye to Ethan. Haven't left yet? As soon as the door opened, Ethan looked sarcastically at the suitcase next to my hand. Ethan, you once said that when I leave you, remember to tell you. I forced a smile and tried to maintain my last bit of dignity. I'm already looking for a lawyer to consult about the divorce, it won't take you too long to wait. Ethan, I'm leaving, goodbye. Every time I said a word, Ethan's face became more and more ugly. He didn't speak, just pursed his lips tightly and stared straight at me. I silently pushed the suitcase to the stairs, just about to go downstairs, but a strong force suddenly grabbed my arm. I watched as the suitcase rolled down the stairs, spilling things all over the floor. Lily, have you made enough trouble? His deep voice was full of anger. Divorce and running away from home. Do you have to act out all the scenes of crying, making a fuss, and threatening suicide? Ethan, let go of me. Years of grievances completely turned into resentment. I raised my head angrily, and the tears I had been holding back all day burst out at this moment. I'm not being petty with you, I'm really tired. So, please, let me go. 25. Seeing me suddenly burst into tears, Ethan was stunned. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but suddenly widened his eyes. Lily, you? Warm liquid flowed from my nose, dripping onto the back of Ethan's hand. As if burned, Ethan suddenly withdrew his hand. I took the opportunity to run into the bathroom, but the blood flowed too fast, and in a short while, the entire sink was stained red. Lily, what's wrong with you? Ethan stood at the door, his consistently indifferent voice trembling slightly. Ethan, in the second drawer of the nightstand in the bedroom, there's my diagnosis. You're right, I really am sick. An unprecedented sense of fatigue swept over me. For the first time, I didn't want to say another word to Ethan. I wiped my face expressionlessly and brushed past Ethan. There was a mess under the stairs, and I squatted on the ground, putting the things back into the suitcase little by little. Ethan then silently walked into the bedroom, and when he came out, he was holding the diagnosis tightly in his hand. Mid-stage leukemia, I thought, he should know the meaning of this disease. Heavy footsteps gradually approached, and Ethan stood in front of me, but I didn't want to look up at him. Until, a pair of trembling hands pulled me into his arms. Ethan hugged me so tightly, as if he would disappear if he let go. Lily. Lily. A suppressed voice with a sob, the wet touch on my neck made me tremble. This was the third time I saw Ethan cry. The first time was the day we registered our marriage, the second time was on our wedding night. And I never thought that Ethan would have a day to cry for me. I'm sorry, Lily, I'm sorry. Ethan's eyes were red, and his face was full of pain and remorse. I didn't know. I didn't know that you called so many times that day, wanting to tell me that you were sick. In the 3 years of our marriage, I had never disturbed Ethan during his work. Only on the day of my diagnosis, I was at a loss and subconsciously called him. Again and again. But each time, it was mercilessly hung up. That day, it was Secretary Lee who called me back. I couldn't bring myself to tell her that I was sick, so I could only tell a lie, but it was exchanged for a mockery. And from beginning to end, Ethan didn't ask me another question. The sound of, I'm sorry, kept coming from my ear. Ethan looked so sad, as if the person who always ignored me and hurt me in these 3 years was not him. I suddenly thought of what Guyun had said to me at the wrong time. Only those who love you will feel sorry for your tears. Once, when I saw Ethan shed tears for Evelyn, my heart would ache. But at this moment, when Ethan shed tears for me, my heart was numb and without a trace of emotion. 26. Ethan not only wouldn't let me go, but also started calling the doctors he knew one by one. Lily, don't be afraid, I will find the best doctor to cure you. Please, don't leave me. He stroked my cheeks with pity, his affectionate appearance giving me the illusion that he loved me deeply. I silently turned my face away, and under the pretense of going to the bathroom, sent a message to Guyun. Guyun, Ethan knows that I'm sick, he's at home now, can you think of a way to help me get him away? I didn't want to stay by Ethan's side anymore, but on my own, I couldn't leave at all. Half an hour later, I lay in bed pretending to be asleep. And Ethan received an emergency call. As the sound of the car engine grew farther and farther away, I quickly dragged my suitcase and opened the door. But I was stopped by someone. Guyun, why are you here? I was a little embarrassed. After all, I only wanted Guyun to help me hold Ethan back, and didn't want to see him. Lily, how long do you think you can run on your own? At most half a day, you will be caught back by Ethan. And, with Ethan's vigilance, you will never have a chance to leave like today again. Then what should I do? Listening to Guyun's objective analysis, I panicked and didn't know what to do. Therefore, I didn't notice the triumphant smile on the corner of Guyun's mouth. So, you come with me, I guarantee that Ethan won't find you. What's more, I'm still your attending doctor, how can you leave me if you want to cure your illness? Of course I knew Guyun was right. But after I realized Guyun's feelings for me, I didn't want to have too much involvement with him. Thinking of this, I lowered my head and took out a bank card from my wallet. Guyun, you've helped me so much, I really don't know how to thank you. There's 50 million in this card, why don't you take it first? My dad gave me a lot of money before he died, and this was the only thing I could offer. And Guyun looked at me expressionlessly, without moving for a long time. Was it too little? Just as I was about to add another card, Guyun finally took the card from my hand. And he tapped my forehead lightly with the card. Okay, Lily, I'll take the card. Can you come with me now? 27. Guyun took me to Jinggang, thousands of miles away from Kuan City. I checked into the hospital and started a systematic treatment. And the attending doctor was still Guyun. Every time after chemotherapy, Guyun would hold my hand and ask me if it hurt. His face full of pity always made me have a moment of trance. I actually had a day to be cherished so much. Perhaps, the torment of the illness was too difficult to bear again and again. Or perhaps, every time I opened my eyes, I had the habit of looking for that familiar figure. I gradually stopped resisting Guyun's approach, and even became more and more dependent on him. Lily, come and try it, has my cooking improved? One day 4 months later, when Guyon cooked me soup again. I lowered my head, and the tears I had been holding back dripped into the soup. Guyon, why are you so good to me? I'm not worth it, I'm really not worth it. Seeing me suddenly cry, Guyon's expression instantly became nervous. But after hearing my murmur clearly, he hugged me with both anger and heartache. Lily, whether you're worth it or not, it's not up to you to decide. Can you not always look down on yourself like this? Tears wet Guyon's front, and I embarrassedly wanted to get up, but he held me even tighter. The sound of vibration in my chest rang in my ear, again and again, knocking on my heart. At that moment, I finally couldn't help but raise my hand and gently wrap it around Guyon's waist. The warm touch in my palm came, and both Guyon and I couldn't help but tremble. Seeing me want to withdraw my hand again, Guyon's eyes darkened. The next second, he gently but forcefully pressed my hand back to his waist. Lily, you have to take responsibility for your actions, you can't take advantage of me and run away. I didn't. My face turned red instantly, and I stammered for a long time, not knowing how to explain. And Guyon, seeing me frowning and pursing my lips, with a look of entanglement, couldn't help but laugh out loud. 28. In the 6th month of coming to Jinggang, heaven finally began to show mercy to me. That day, when Guyon told me that he had found a matching bone marrow, Guyon and I looked at each other, and our eyes turned red at the same time. Doctors don't treat themselves, this time my chief surgeon wasn't Guyon. Seeing the time for the surgery getting closer and closer, Guyon seemed even more anxious and nervous than me. Lily, the dean always joked that I am the steadiest knife in the operating room. When he said this, Guyon was hugging me from behind. He gave a wry smile and gently rested his head on my shoulder. I once felt confused about myself for not being able to empathize with the family members of patients, but now, when you have to face this test of life and death, I finally realize the feeling of being afraid of losing you. As a doctor, Guyon didn't know who he had listened to these days, and actually asked for a peace charm for me. He hung the peace charm around my neck with a pious expression. And on his forehead, I could vaguely see faint marks. I held back my tears, held his face, and kissed him for the first time. The White Horse Temple in Jinggang was famous, and in the past, when Ethan had bad luck, I was so scared that I flew to Jinggang overnight, kowtowing every step, and asked for a peace charm for him. Lily, you believe in these lying things. But Ethan scoffed at this, and later, I didn't know where that peace charm had gone. Now, that peace charm that had been lost for many years was finally handed back to me in a different way by someone who treasured it. Thinking about it carefully, in the 6 months since I left Ethan, from the beginning, my heart would still ache uncontrollably when I thought of him. But now, I could mention him calmly, like a stranger. Time is indeed the best medicine in the world. Guyon, can I trouble you to tell Ethan my news here? Guyon's mouth, which was originally grinning from my initiative to kiss him, drooped down instantly. Seeing him stare at me with a resentful look like looking at a heartless man, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and quickly took out the divorce agreement from the drawer and held it in front of him. Guyon, don't get me wrong. I just want to make a clean break with Ethan. 29. Ethan hasn't been doing well in these 6 months. After I left, he suddenly stopped his cooperation with Evelyn for some reason. Evelyn was so angry that she seduced her stepson, and gave Ethan a heavy blow. What made matters worse was that an anonymous IP revealed the love-hate entanglement between me, Ethan, and Evelyn on the internet. Netizens followed the clues and dug up everything that had happened over the years. Eating from the bowl and cursing the cook, CEO Ethan, I respect you as a coward. My White-Eyed Wolf Son-in-Law, starring, Lily, Ethan. Lily is really unlucky to meet Ethan. I heard that she has leukemia, I don't know if it's true or not. For a time, the hashtags, Pity Lily, Ethan Die, and Evelyn Mistress were hung on the hot search for several days. And the ironic remarks of, I wish you marry Ethan, became the current popular meme on the internet. Because of the impact of these negative news, the stock price of Way Corporation fell again and again. The shareholders of the board of directors finally couldn't bear it any longer, and united to remove Ethan from the position of president. And Ethan didn't care about these things at all. I heard from Guyon that in these 6 months, Ethan had been looking for me everywhere like crazy. Some people who kicked him when he was down even falsely claimed to have my news, forcing Ethan to kneel and beg them. Even knowing those people's malicious intentions, Ethan didn't dare to give up any hope. So, he endured all those insults. 30. When I saw Ethan again, I was stunned, and couldn't believe my eyes. The haggard person in front of me looked more like a patient with a terminal illness than me. And Ethan, when he saw me for the first time, his eyes turned red. Lily. His hoarse voice with a trace of caution, Ethan walked to my hospital bed and knelt down directly. Lily. Lily. He held my hand with tears in his eyes, stroking it on his cheeks again and again, then lowered his head and left a series of fine kisses. What are you doing? I was startled by his actions, wanted to pull my hand back, but he held it even tighter. Ethan, let go. I was angry and anxious, and couldn't help but raise my hand and slap him. The sound wasn't loud, but it stunned Ethan for a moment. I quickly took out the divorce agreement that I had prepared long ago and threw it on him. Ethan, I'm going to have surgery tomorrow. The doctor said that the probability of success is only 50%. But I don't want to die, with your name engraved on my tombstone. So, please, divorce me. No, Lily, you'll be fine. Hearing me say die and tombstone, Ethan anxiously wanted to reach out and hug me again. I held my hand in front of my chest, but saw Ethan's movements suddenly pause. Lily, what is this? His eyes stared straight at my right middle finger. There was a small ring. It was drawn carefully with a marker by Guyon this morning. Lily, draw this on, and you are mine. If King Yama sees it, he will definitely not be willing to rob you with me. When having surgery, all the jewelry on the body had to be taken off. Guyon's originality made my nervous heart calm down in an instant. This was a little secret between Guyon and me. I didn't expect it to be discovered by Ethan. He looked at me despairingly, and seeing that I didn't respond, his face became pale. Lily, I won't let you go. Even if I die, you have to die by my side. Ethan hugged me in his arms, ignoring my struggles, and kept saying, I'm sorry, and I love you in my ear. This was the first time Ethan said, I love you, to me. In the past, for these 3 words, I was willing to hit myself until I was bruised and battered. But now, when I heard these 3 words again, my heart was only filled with endless fatigue and weariness. Ethan, let me go. Nasal blood flowed out again, dripping on the divorce agreement. I looked at Ethan expressionlessly, my eyes with an unprecedented firmness. Even if I die now, I don't want to be entangled with you anymore. So please, give me back my freedom, okay? Ethan looked sad, shaking his head, and let out painful low roars. Finally, he tremblingly signed his name, slumped to the ground in a trance, and covered his face and cried. 31. I had a long dream. In the dream, there was Dad, there was Ethan, there was Evelyn. I was very painful, and didn't want to wake up again. But a pair of warm hands hugged me from behind. Lily, it's me. I slowly opened my eyes, and looked at Guyon's red eyes. Lily, the surgery was a success. Guyon's voice trembled, and the next second, a tear dropped on my face. My heart suddenly softened, and I couldn't help but reach out and poke the dimple at the corner of Guyon's mouth. Lily, what do you want to do next? Guyon took the opportunity to hold my hand and kissed it on his lips. He looked at me expectantly, and glanced at the ring drawn on my hand. But I blushed a little embarrassed. Next. I want to work hard to get into college. It's embarrassing to say, because of my experience in high school, even if Ethan briefly tutored me, I still didn't get into college. Later, my dad planned to send me abroad, but I took the first step and registered my marriage with Ethan. After that, my dad passed away, and I never found the opportunity to study again. Guyon was stunned after hearing my words. I was a little embarrassed, afraid that he would look down on me, but Guyon seemed to be defeated by me and chuckled. You little ungrateful thing, I really am. Forget it, isn't it just waiting a few more years? I can wait. With that, he lowered his head and kissed me on the lips. Outside the window, the sun was just right. I thought, for 23-year-old me, life had only just begun. Guyon's extra. The first time I saw Lily was at her wedding with Ethan. The story of a rich daughter marrying a poor boy went from books to reality. At that time, everyone came with a mentality of watching the fun. Of course, I was no exception. My parents had a business marriage, they each had different lovers, and I could even smile and greet those people. I never believed in love. But that day, I saw Lily. Throughout the wedding, her eyes never moved away from Ethan. Those were eyes that could love. When the lingering love overflowed, my heart trembled. It's a pity that love didn't belong to me. I had to admit that at that moment, I was a little envious of Ethan. I thought I wouldn't have any more contact with Lily. But 3 years later, when Lily sat in front of me, I recognized her at a glance. Those eyes that once moved my heart, revealed an unresolvable sadness. She came alone. Even, when I tentatively asked her about her relatives, she lowered her head in embarrassment. I don't have any relatives. She lied. A few days ago, I and Ethan attended the same cocktail party. It seemed that Ethan wasn't good to her. At that moment, in addition to pity, a different kind of thought was growing in my heart. So, not long after, at my dad's birthday banquet, when I saw with my own eyes how Ethan made her embarrassed, I couldn't restrain my emotions any longer, took off my coat, and put it on her head. Ethan's extra. The first thing Lily did after the surgery was go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to divorce me. That day, Guyon Chen Teng Ta Zai Wo Lia Zhi Jian, so I had no chance to say anything to persuade her to stay. Of course, I knew, even if I knelt on the ground and begged Lily, she wouldn't change her mind again. She was obviously a very weak person, but at the moment when she made up her mind, Lily was more resolute than anyone else. Just like back then, when facing my sudden proposal, she returned home without hesitation, and took the household registration book. At that time, I had nothing, and she had everything I desired. Later, I relied on Lily to gain money and power. Finally, those who once looked down on me, nodded and bowed to me, and did everything to flatter me. I enjoyed Lily's sacrificial love for me, while at the same time despising her stupidity and lack of enterprise in my heart. I thought conceitedly that Lily would never leave me, but I forgot that even the deepest love has a day to wear out. That day, after coming out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, Lily smiled and said goodbye to me, then turned around, holding Guyun's hand. That was the first time I watched Lily's back drift away, but in the past, she had looked at my back, for 3 years. At that moment, I couldn't suppress the sadness in my heart anymore, and knelt on the ground and cried. I finally understood my feelings for Lily, but I lost her forever. It turned out, I was the stupidest person in the world. After I chose to leave with nothing, the Yuan family had no more scruples. Not long after, in a deliberately 制造的一场车祸, I permanently lost my legs. Without money and power, I was still nothing. I became a cripple sitting in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. 4 years later, Lily graduated from college, and as an outstanding student representative, gave a speech on stage. She looked so cheerful and confident, a far cry from the way she was when she was with me. Guyun went on stage to give Lily flowers, then knelt on one knee, and proposed to her in front of everyone. They embraced and kissed each other in a chorus of blessings. Under the sunlight, Lily's eyes were full of tears. Still those eyes that could love, but they would never look at me again. I hid in the shadows, watching their happiness in a self-abusive manner, and finally, sitting in a wheelchair, left in disappointment. I thought, God was finally fair. And a person like me was destined not to get a good ending.